Unfortunately, if I liked everything about the recent reboots and only had good things to say, I would not be making this video. In fact, I probably wouldn't be making any videos at all. But that wasn't the case, unfortunately. Therefore, I will explain the main things that I had issues with. So what was wrong with the reboots? That's what I'll explain here. First, recently the manga and anime series Urusei Yatsura got a reboot in 2022, and it was completed last year. For those who don't know, Urusei Yatsura is a popular manga written from 1978 to 1987, and the property recently got a new anime in the form of a readaptation of the original manga. Unfortunately, the new adaptation had issues that I will discuss. I'm sorry, but the way the characters were handled did not look good. The reason is that the back of the characters' heads were totally and completely pushed in. The backs of the characters' heads are unnaturally flattened, almost as if they were pushed in, which gives them a strange, distorted silhouette. The back of the characters' heads have been totally squished in. It looks horrible, and they look nothing like they did in the manga. I mean, look at Ryanosuke. Her head has been flattened into a pancake. It's just off. What were they thinking? Just focus on the part behind the front of the ear. The back edge is practically on top of the ear. There's no depth to it. No three-dimensional depth. And it's pinched in like someone indented her head with their thumbs. It's just not the full, proper, rounded shape of a normal back of the head. And that would be the case even if there wasn't that indented dent. I found several issues with the new anime. The proper way to do an anime readaptation is to make it look as much like the original manga as possible. It should look exactly like the manga and not the first anime, because if people wanted the original anime's look, they could just go back and watch the original anime adaptation. In things that the original manga leaves blank, like colors, background compositions, and texture, then you can have space so you can have a nod to the original anime. It's a horrible idea to squish in the back of anime characters' heads. It does not look good. So instead of drawing the heads fully like they were in the original manga, they don't do that. They draw the heads to look like dented basketballs. Any standard anime character design does not look good with those features. Yes, other completely different types of art styles can have these types of features and look good, but not the more standard anime/manga art style. It just won't look good. I don't know why they did this. Ryanosuke and the other characters never were drawn that way, or had this feature, or looked like this in the manga. They never had this feature, or looked like this, even in the early part of the original anime either. Ryoko never looked like this, even in the early original anime. From the very beginning of the manga, the back of the heads were always drawn bigger, rounder, with normal volume. And that was also the case in the early part of the anime. Yes, the characters in the early part of the anime looked different than they did in most of the manga, but it wasn't for that reason. The main reason why they looked different was that the top parts of the sides of the heads above the cheekbone were drawn pushed in. But that's not important right now. So I don't know why they decided to spontaneously draw the characters in a way completely different from both the original manga and even the early part of the original anime. The characters in the early part of the manga were always drawn with a normal-sized, fuller volume back of the head, so if it doesn't look like either the early part of the original anime or the original manga, including the early part of it, then why do they do this? Another thing they did with Ran was that they squished down the top part of her head. They squished down the top part of the head in some of the characters in the anime. It's odd that they did this. They only did this with Ran and a handful of other characters. The rest of the characters were drawn differently. With Ran, the top of the head was squished down so that the distance from the eyebrows to the top of the head was significantly shorter than the distance from the eyebrows to the bottom of the chin. So that the eyebrows were drawn significantly above the horizontal midpoint line at the halfway mark on the head instead of on it. It's odd because most of the other characters are drawn with higher, taller top parts of the head, and the eyebrows down on the horizontal midline. So Ran is randomly drawn differently, except when she isn't. It's odd that Ran was drawn differently from the rest of the characters in this important aspect. Ran looks different from most of the manga. Yes, in part of the manga and original anime, she was drawn this way. However, Ran should look like she did in a majority of the manga, not the first couple of chapters she appeared in. And she looks better when drawn like most of the characters in this regard. So it wasn't a good idea to squish down the top part of her head and draw the eyebrows above the horizontal midline of the head. Ran is better with a more voluminous top of the head, and the back of her head shouldn't have been pushed in. The recent Ranma 1/2 anime also shares a lot of these issues with the characters' looks. The top of Akane's head and some other characters, like male Ranma, was drawn pushed down. They squished down the top of Akane's head and other characters' heads so that the eyebrows were drawn significantly above the horizontal midline instead of at it. Also, the backs of the head of male characters were drawn pushed in, so the heads lacked the full volume of a fully rounded shape. If you are going to take shortcuts when animating, then you have to take measures to correct for them. If you are not going to animate the jaw moving down when the characters talk, then you have to adjust to compensate for inadvertent effects. When the mouth is drawn wide open, the jaw is lowered, increasing the distance from the eyebrows to the chin relative to the rest of the head, and moving the horizontal midline down. So the midline is moved further down relative to the eyebrows. Therefore, drawing the jaw in its open mouth relative position, when the mouth is closed, raises the position of the eyebrows significantly above the horizontal midline, and changes and alters the proportions of the face from the original form. If you are not going to animate the jaw moving and lowering, then you should draw the head with its mouth closed proportions to compensate, and therefore preserve the original proportions and relative positions relative to the midline. Pushing in the back of anime characters' heads always looks bad, but yes, I am aware that there are some anime/manga art styles where characters' tops of the heads are drawn smaller, so the eyebrows are drawn higher up on the head. I'll even say that there was a very brief moment when Rumiko Takahashi transitioned out of her original art style where she drew like this, but it does not look good when adopting her art style. So it is a really bad idea to squish in the top or back of the characters' heads when drawing characters designed in Rumiko Takahashi's art style. Characters look best when drawn with full volume at the top of the head and the back of the head. Drawing the heads of Takahashi's characters pushed in and flattened always looks really bad and is a bad idea. If you're actually concerned about comments about large foreheads, and you actually pay any attention to them, or heed them any mind, when people refer to the forehead, they are talking about the area from the eyebrows to the hairline, so they are not referring to the frontal scalp as part of the forehead, or including the frontal scalp in the forehead. So therefore they are excluding the frontal scalp, so you could just lower the hairline and keep the top of the head in the same place, and so keep the eyebrows at the same part of the head at the horizontal midline. The fact that they couldn't universally apply this technique or method when animating characters with a complex hairstyle, like hair buns, or animal ears, or an afro, or the character was wearing large hair ornaments, like a headband, or an outright hood, shows why this was a bad idea in the first place. I never thought I would have said this in 2021, but I'm glad they're probably never making any more anime of Urusei Yatsura. However, on the off chance someone 10, 20 years in the future is watching this video, who is actually in a position that makes decisions about these things, get Sunrise to make the anime. They are the best ones to make any UI anime. They would do the best quality job out of all the animation studios, and a decision to use them would completely pay off. You wouldn't go wrong using Sunrise to make more Urusei Yatsura anime. The best quality content would be made by Sunrise. So if you're going to do it right, and Sunrise is the only one I would trust, it would totally pay off in improved quality and enduring perception. If any content were to be made again in the future, I'm a firm believer that it should be Sunrise. They're the only ones that can be trusted to do the art style justice. With the direction animation is going, a lot of it will be done with CGI renders, transformed through an AI filter to look fully 2D. When doing this then, the program is going to have to render two different models at different angles, or transform one model into a different model in 2D form, creating extra steps, making the process more complicated, and creating extra unnecessary work in the process. I was really unhappy with how the character designs turned out. Back in 2020, I never could have imagined someone would go so far as to conceive of deviating from both the character designs of the original manga and the standard practice of mainstream anime and manga for the past 50 years, so that the characters look completely different from the manga and even the original anime in this one crucial aspect. Regardless of what anyone thinks, I was really upset and disappointed about this. I needed to make this video so I could say my piece, process it, and move on with my life. Now that I've said my piece, I can put this behind me and go back to accepting the world as a flawed and imperfect place, full of disappointment and shortcomings. But at least now I've said what needed to be said. All in all, the Reboot's designs really missed the mark. Characters need that full volume look. Subtle self-censorship is fine, but drawing attention to it just distracts. If you want Sunrise to tackle Urusei Yatsura again, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more anime deep dives.